Welcome back, people of the pod, to season 3, episode 6, the season finale of our 3rd season of Office Hours with Karpf and Loge. I am, as I am every time we are on this podcast, Peter Loge, an associate professor in the School of Media and Public Affairs at the George Washington University and a strategic consultant. And I'm joined, as always, as on this podcast, by
Dave Karpf, also an associate professor in George Washington University School of Media and Public Affairs. I keep waiting for you to be somebody different. We are 3 seasons in, and you just keep Peter Loge. Welcome to Office Hours, everybody. As I told my students yesterday, I'm fully off-brand and actually in a good mood about politics for once.
We'll get to your good mood and how weird that is, and eventually, if we get a sponsor and people keep paying for this podcast, maybe in season like 7. We'll get around to me being somebody else. It's like Sense8. We're just going to end on a weird note. That said, we may be done for the fall, but we are not entirely through. We're doing a holiday special, a live hour-long with a special guest holiday special on December 13th. I'm excited, Dave.
I'm very excited. I think it's going to be the most exciting thing for me happening on December 13th.
We'll get to that on December 13th. You'll have to turn in to find out why Dave's lying. I'm excited. We're going to be doing it in SMPA.
Birthdays are boring.
So you heard it. It's his birthday. So we're expecting just a big sing-along, which I'm excited about.
Come to our live event because there will be cake or something, I guess.
I've just made a note that you're passively aggressively asking for cake. So noted.
I like yellow cake, chocolate frosting, keep it simple.
Cake, chocolate frosting. So you heard that, people of the pod. I expect all of you to send Dave yellow cake, which sounds in the wrong context not like such a good thing. So let's get to it. We've got a lot going on. We've had elections. We've got a World Cup coming up.
So many things.
There's so many things. The crypto, it turns out, might actually be what you said it was all along. And this is I feel like Elon Musk is like the recurring character. If we ever do get that sponsor us, we're going to have to give Elon a cut, and he may need the money soon.
I think that Twitter should sponsor us because we would be less of a waste of money for Twitter than everything that Twitter is doing. Like, it's much higher return for Twitter to spend a lot of money advertising on our admittedly not very heavily trafficked podcast. On Twitter doing really anything else that it's done the past 2 weeks. Like, it's not going to lose $1 billion advertising with us. Everything else it's doing, losing like $1 billion.
See, people, it's all about where you set the bar. There's a strategic communications lesson in here. It's all about where you set the bar. When I raise money for candidates or for causes, my standard pitch is everybody look at your shoes. Think about your shoes. How much did you pay for your shoes? Now think about the future of Congress. Think about whatever cause we're raising money for. If your shoes are worth that, then certainly this candidate, this effort, this cause are worth what it costs for your shoes.
Everybody look at your shoes. That's your lead. Okay, we're going to work on that in season 4.
It works. It works, actually. It ends up working. Yes. It's not even my line. I stole the line, but it ends up working. Just saying. So the Elon are we done? Are we like, is Twitter, by the time I post this on Twitter, will Twitter vanish and everyone will be on Mastodon?
Look, I do now have a Mastodon account because you need a backup plan, folks. Like, get a backup plan. I don't think that Twitter will be dead and gone when this posts tomorrow, but it would not be surprising if there's a pretty major outage this week because he's fired half of the people who work at Twitter directly, 80% of the contractors for Twitter. Yesterday, he announced that he was just going to start shutting down 80% of the micro applications that Twitter uses because he said, like, we don't need 80% of these. And then immediately they didn't shut off two-factor authentication, but they shut off the text service where when you use two-factor authentication, it texts you what number to enter. So anyone who logged out couldn't log back in. Like Twitter actually really could use our help or anyone's help, because what we're seeing here is both at a technical level and at a strategic communications level, like a meltdown for the ages. Like, I don't think that he has made a single good decision since we last talked, because it's been 3 weeks. Like, I think when we last talked, he was just about to acquire it. Like, a thing that he decided was, all right, we're going to start charging for verification status, the blue check, which I, by the way, never had a blue check, didn't earn it. Yeah, you didn't either, but come on, like I had the bed bug thing. Like, come on, people.
That's true.
Anyway,
You're Twitter famous. You deserve you're the blue check in this podcast.
and I asked for it, and I said, and they said no. What are you gonna do? Anyway, the point is, he decided we're gonna get rid of the old verification system. We're gonna do a new one, and if you pay $8 to us, then we will give you a blue check. Immediately, everyone who works at Twitter and everyone who doesn't work at Twitter, like including me, just off the top of my head, I was like I joked at the time, okay, so for $8, I can then change my Twitter handle to @BrettStevens New York Times, and I can just like pretend to be him, and it'll be verified, and people won't know. Like that, like I'm not gonna do that. But if I wanted to go out in a blaze of glory, like that's what that's what I do. And Twitter is full of people who are both funnier than me and more chaotic than I am. So of course, inevitably, as soon as they launch it, like probably the tweet that got the most attention for good reason is somebody set up an Eli Lilly Twitter account and posted that starting now, insulin is going to be free. And then Eli Lilly had to tweet saying, no, that's not us. That's a fake account. We're still charging way too much for insulin. And it's not clear whether this is directly because of the tweet or because they also got, I think, some like drug didn't get patented. But right around then, they lost like $1 billion in market cap on the stock exchange. Nintendo, which famously really likes to protect their IP, somebody set up a Mario with giving the finger to the internet, like just chaos everywhere. Senator Ed Markey, a journalist, decided to test whether or not they could change their name to Ed Markey, just impersonate him and have the full verified, this is because this person is a public official. Yes, they could. He then sent a letter to Elon saying, hey, I would really like you to explain like what you're doing about these impersonation problems, why this is happening. And Elon replied by saying, well, maybe it's because your account just looks like such a parody, which, fun note, Elon, dumb thing to say to a member of the majority party that will be holding hearings with your ass next year. Like, have fun.
And Senator Markey knows tech and understands tech, and he's been on telecom issues forever. Like back when I was a lobbyist, I used to lobby Senator Markey on telecom issues. And this was more than a decade ago. He's surrounded by good, smart people. This isn't some snarky backbencher trying to get attention. This is a well-respected, smart guy with a terrific staff who has power. Like, just like, don't pick that fight unless you're pretty certain you're going to win.
And the trick is, again, like Elon has always picked those fights with senators, right? Like he has picked weird, dumb fights with Chuck Schumer, where I think he tried to make fun of Chuck Schumer's penis, if I'm remembering that one right. He referred to Elizabeth Warren as a Karen, I think. Like, but that was before he was the head of Twitter. Like, when you are the electric car and rocket guy who likes to shitpost on Twitter, you have free speech to shitpost senators. I don't think it's good. I don't think it's very respectable, but like, you can do that. That's fine. When you're the head of Twitter and the senator isn't just talking about raising taxes on billionaires, but is saying, hey, social media CEO, can you please explain this fuck up from social media? You can't just piss off that senator. Like, you're in trouble. Right. Another thing, which he probably didn't know before he bought Twitter, is that back in 2011, Twitter settled some errors that are made with the FTC by entering a consent decree where they told the FTC, before we make any major changes or launch any new products, we have to get a pre-approval from you. He's gone ahead and fired pretty much everybody involved with that, and laid off so much of the staff that a lawyer on Twitter's Slack last week told everyone, hey, I know he's telling engineers to just self-certify. You can't do that. We're going to get fined billions, and you might get fined too. By the way, here's the number for the whistleblower hotline. Good luck out there, folks. Like, this isn't just like chaos that we all laugh at, and it's probably bad for their stock. They don't have stock anymore. They're private. This is like, he spent $44 billion to buy the company, had no plan, has surrounded himself with people like David Sachs, who is, I think, maybe the dumbest person in Silicon Valley, and is like not listening to advice from anyone who's actually there or any actual engineers. He's going to rack up billions in extra fines because he's doing stuff that is patently illegal while the FTC is watching and saying, wait, no, that's the thing you're not allowed to do. Give us money. Like, we're going to fund the national deficit with this. instead of like minting the platinum coin to avoid the debt ceiling, we're just going to like find the platinum Elon. That's the new plan.
Find the platinum Elon. I love that. I love that. So
Elon.
we need to though move off of Elon. There's much more Elon Musk ranting on.
But I have so much to say.
So much, and you're saying it on Twitter. And
On
you're
Twitter,
saying,
I'm also substacking like once a week about this, and my Substack has almost doubled in size just from people who enjoy my Elon snark. I feel so bad for those new readers when I launch into like old tech, like long old tech essays, which is what it's actually Substack is actually for. But yeah, like I am substacking up a storm making fun of this dude. Check it out.
check it out, people. We got some other things we need to check out because the clock
Has
is running.
anything else that happened in the news? Oh wait, before we go to the real thing, can I just note Monday last week. So on Monday, November 7th, a guy named Sam Bankman-Fried was worth about $16 billion and was the white knight of cryptocurrency. Like he was the respectable guy who ran FTX, which if you don't know the company, they also own the naming rights for the Miami Heat's arena. Also, like they're the guy who they're one of the major companies that advertised at the Super Bowl and had a bunch of celebrities telling you like FTX, they're trustworthy for crypto. So he was worth $16 billion and had the respectable crypto exchange. Except it turned out, as we learned on Tuesday, November 8th, that was based on like billions of dollars of fraud. He is now worth nothing, and I think in custody. And yeah, it's turning out that those of us who spent the past few years just yelling at crypto is a Ponzi scheme scam are looking very, very right now. We'll talk about that probably on a different essay, in a different episode, or maybe since it's my birthday, you can let me talk about a lot on the live episode on December 9th.
You're going to talk about whatever you want a lot. You're going to talk about whatever you want a lot anyway. I do want to make that's a good pivot to soccer, which is coming up. FTX, among other things, invested in some local DC sports teams, including DC United. I haven't tracked what's happening with DC United and FTX because I've been too busy tracking what happened to Ben Olsen, whose World Cup jersey is over my shoulder, who's now the new coach of the Houston Dynamo, the Houston franchise, owned by Ted Siegel, an SMPA alum. Yeah, pretty cool. It's a good guy. He's a very nice guy. Anyway, so the World Cup is coming up in Qatar. A lot to be said about that, but I do want to talk about the election because the clock is running, and I feel like people tuned in for the election episode, which should have started 15 minutes ago.
Communication experts the week after the election maybe should be talking about the election and not Twitter.
Yeah. So I'm feeling good. How are you feeling, Dave? You're smiling. Does it hurt? Does it hurt to smile? Is that
I mean, like I'm not used to using those muscles if we're talking about the state of American politics. Yeah, good day for democracy. I didn't think I would get to say that in the 2020s, but here we are. Pretty cool.
Very cool. I think that you and I, we were talking before we came on air, the Senate was always going to be close, and I'm not sure there are a lot of surprises there. I was pleasantly surprised to see Adam Laxalt go down, but for a whole lot of reasons, I was happy to see Adam Laxalt go down. But the House, everybody expected Republicans to take the House and the president's party to lose seats because close to an ironclad law of American politics is the president's party loses seats in the House in the midterms. And when the president's numbers are down and inflation is up, you can expect big losses. That's not the case. It looks like the Republicans are going to control the House, but not by a lot.
Yeah. It's really interesting. What we're seeing here is a major win for the Democrats compared to expectations. I was talking to my students about this yesterday. Like in terms of Biden's agenda, the narrow House majority that Republicans are going to have will prevent them from doing the most stupid stuff. Like I have been predicting that once they had a majority, Jim Jordan would try to impeach Biden 3 times, just because that's one more time than Trump. And like that's the type of thing Jim Jordan would do. If he's going to be the committee chair, he's going to launch all these investigations until he can get his majority to vote for an impeachment 3 times. That'll just be dead when it goes to the Senate because it's going to be a joke. But like, of course you do that. He's a joke. And also they would, shut down the government, try to default on the national, on the debt, like do all of the stuff that they would like to do so that the government and the economy and the country are smoking ruin in 2024. And then they can blame Biden for that and run against that. With such a narrow majority, particularly with a lot of that majority coming from people who won in New York State in seats that are going to be difficult to defend, because if the New York Dems had done their job a little better, they probably could have won some of those races. That's going to just like, this is going to be 2 years of Republicans in disarray in the House, because like Kevin McCarthy's not going to be able to manage this stuff. There's going to be a lot of infighting. We are still going to be less governable in 2023 than we were in 2021, 2022, because Dems lost the House, and that's going to make it harder to govern. But holding the Senate, and in particular, winning against expectations, means, and this is the part that's really promising. Like the two things that make me genuinely hopeful. One is all of the election deniers lost. Like there was the real direct threat of people winning Secretary of State races in swing states, and then just doing what they said they were going to do and saying, I don't care about the votes. This state goes to Trump in 2 years. They all lost. That looks an awful lot like the American public. And in some places, like the Secretary of State candidate lost, but then the governor candidate won. That was Nevada. So that's a clear sign that being an election denier is bad, because the American public cares about democracy. If that is a belief that trickles up through the Republican Party network, that is really good. In the same way that if the Republican Party network, at the moment, they're leaving this saying, wow, the problem here is that we nominated all these shitty Trumpist candidates and lost races we should have won. I've said before on this podcast that only the Republican Party can fix the Republican Party. The way that happens is once Republican elites come to believe that like populist authoritarianism is an electoral loser. Once they start to believe that, that's when the segment of the party network that currently opposes Trump and authoritarianism starts to win the internal fights that right now they're getting their asses kicked on. So this is a really useful outcome, like the win against expectations. Even though Dems actually lost the House, that win against expectations is going to be very useful for the Republican Party fixing the Republican Party. That's a good day for democracy. What do you think?
Yeah, I largely agree. I think a couple of things come out of this that are important. The first is obviously the election deniers winning or losing across the board. There's some people who are at January 6th who are coming to Congress. There are some, crazy people. Marjorie Taylor Greene has already endorsed Trump. She's coming back. Boebert's coming back. There was a 30-second minute when we thought that she would lose, but she's up by about 1,000 votes. She's going to come back. Davis Schweikert's coming back. The Democrat was ahead in that race up until the late votes were coming in. Interestingly, in Arizona, Carrie Lake is saying the problem is late votes are bad, but it's saving a Republican member of the House because the Democrat was leading on election day. I think two things come out of this that I find interesting. The first is I'm just going to own up that I underestimated the amount to which the American people would vote on democracy and overestimated the amount they would vote on inflation. I always thought the Republicans would take the House, but I thought it'd be by more. And my standard talking point has been, but for Dobbs, this is a better year for Republicans, which I think is true. And but for inflation, it's a better year for Democrats, which I think is true. But this is better than I thought. My predictions were wrong. The thing that I think, two things come out of this that I think are important, though, that you and I have talked about. One is people behave their incentives. And second, stories matter, right? These are some super close elections, handfuls of votes. And so the reason for any election is any number of things. It could be the GOTV operation, the quality of the candidate, the TikTok ads, like whatever. But we're bad at that. We want a macro narrative. This election was about, right? And you and I are both drowning in emails from liberal groups, conservatives, moderates, pollsters saying, aha, we told you all along the thing we said was right, therefore do more of what we said, right? And if the dominant story is Trump was a drag, pro-democracy is good, people like the right, women like to control their own health care, if those are the stories, if that's the narrative, then that becomes how people run races in 2024. Right? Because the 24 races are going to be run based on the stories we tell about 2022. So far, those stories are pretty clearly, and I think this is also supported by data, Donald Trump is a drag. There's a piece I'm going to put in the show notes, peterloge.com podcast, and also on Medium, on my Medium page, the posted analysis of races that were close, where Trump weighed in, and Trump dragged down the Republican nominee by about 2 points. So one could, because the House is so close, one could argue that Donald Trump cost the Republicans a bigger majority and almost cost them the House, right? So now Trump bad. All the Trump bad candidates, as you said, running for Secretary of State lost, therefore Trump bad. Again, the margins are so thin that that may or may not be the case. I don't know if you were in school, when you were in school, you had to read The Spot by Diamond and Bates, History of Television Advertising. Really interesting book. Just walks through this story. Eisenhower answers America. General Eisenhower. Really interesting stuff. One chapter was called "It Was the Truck." And I love this story. Close local election. Guy comes into a campaign headquarters and says, "This is really close. I want to support the candidate. I've got a truck with a sound system on top. I want to drive around town shouting the candidate's name. What do you think?" The campaign manager's like, "Sure, go, okay, whatever." Guy drives around town shouting the candidate's name. Close election, the candidate wins. Guy comes back the day after the election and says, "It was the truck." Sure. The story will determine how 2024 is run. If the story is the American people like democracy, they like individual rights, and they don't like lunatics, then I think, I'm feeling good about 2024.
Yes, I would add, I think that's right. There's two bits that I would add. One is, I think it is also important in the story and also true. It's not just that women and all voters are upset about the overturning of Roe v. Wade because they are pro-abortion. That's true. It is also true that people are upset at a Supreme Court that has decided that its legitimacy doesn't matter because what are you going to do about it? Right? Like this upcoming Supreme Court is going to be hearing the independent state legislature doctrine cases. Like they're going to be hearing arguments so radical that the Federalist Societies even said, like, no, that's bullshit. But they're going to be hearing radical conservative arguments saying those state legislatures that we gerrymandered so hard that it's impossible in Wisconsin, like the state legislative win in Wisconsin, along with Evers winning re-election, is Democrats denied Republicans a supermajority. And that's about as good as they can do because they have drawn those maps so that really doesn't matter like how much people vote, Republicans will have a majority in Wisconsin. Independent state legislature doctrine says, you know what, having done that, we're just going to let those gerrymandered legislatures be the ones that decide how they apportion electoral votes. That's a way to get around people voting to elect the president. That's really dangerous. And at least 3 justices of the Supreme Court are going to say, wow, that's really good for my candidate, I'm in favor. Possibly 5 or 6 would say that. The additional 3 being political actors, I think need to correctly believe that, hey, we just cost Republicans an awful lot of House seats because we got a little too excited about tearing down Roe just because that's what we've always dreamt about doing. Like if the Supreme Court majority believes that elections have consequences and so do Supreme Court decisions, that is going to temper their actions, and it's the only thing that can. So I think that's an important part of the story and also has the benefit of being genuinely true.
I think I agree. The important parts for me as a strategic comms guy is people act on stories, right? There's a victor, a victim, and a vanquished. My past makes sense to explain my present, which therefore determines my future. And there are a lot of different stories you could tell coming out of this election. They have to be real enough to be true enough to be grounded in reality. They have to be true to life. And they can't be terribly complicated, right? If it is Americans like democracy, Americans like rights. Don't take away democracy, don't take away rights. Run on that. Then we get to argue about inflation or taxes or student loans or whatever, right? Then I think we're back to being sort of relatively normal. And if the story can be told, if politicians believe they get punished for supporting Trump, supporting insurrectionists, supporting federal overreach, they will stop behaving that way. What politicians believe they're rewarded and punished for, what they're actually rewarded and punished for, aren't always the same thing. Right? I've worked for enough of these guys who think, oh, well, I did this and I got elected, therefore what I did got me elected. And actually math got you elected. You're a Democrat running in an unpopular president's second midterm. I don't know what to tell you, and you're going to lose in the next president's second midterm. That's just, and I remember during the Affordable Care Act debate, I was talking to a couple of congressional officers who were saying, oh, we're going to hold out to the end. We're going to get a deal. We'll go back to our voters. It's like, no, you're a D. It's a Democratic bill that's unpopular. You will lose. Support it now and run hard on it. Don't finesse it. Right? But they like the story. And so if Republicans believe the story is Trump is a drag. Aligning with Trump is bad for you electorally. Align instead with DeSantis, Youngkin, whatever, then they will do that. I disagree with those guys on a lot of issues. But I also think they believe in something other than themselves and their own egos. And Trump pretty clearly only believes in his own ego.
I think you're giving DeSantis in particular too much credit there.
But he's not anti-democratic. He's finessed it.
That he is. I think he's a little better at finessing, but anyway, maybe. That can be a season 4 conversation since I think it's going to come up. Also, I keep trying to make this work on Twitter. I'm going to mention it here now. I think the DeSantis mania right now is going to die down pretty quick. I think he's going to be remembered as a Hobbesian candidate. He's nasty, brutish, and short.
I love the bada boom. So that's a riff on my line is political campaigns with apologies to Thomas Hobbes are nasty, brutish, and long. But I mean, the DeSantis furor has all the feel. One of my Democratic friends pointed out this feels like John Glenn. I keep thinking the Graham campaign Phil Graham campaign out of Texas, like the hot flavor of the month in November of a midterm is not the nominee. Yeah. They're not. This is all of you people saying, well, clearly in 2024, the Republican nominee is going to, no. And please stop saying Biden's not going to run. Please. The worst political take in the ever expanding universe of stupid political takes, a bright shining star is the Republican operative who wrote in the Hill shortly after the election that the smart move for Biden is to fire Vice President Harris, appoint Governor Newsom, and then resign, thereby making Gavin Newsom president.
That's a really bad take. That's a really bad take.
So much wrong. The problem is that smart young black woman is dragging the old white guy down. So we need to fire her. What?
So I want to add one more take into the mix, which is on point with what you're saying about narrative. Part of the problem in the Republican Party fixing the Republican Party is the narratives that they have talked themselves into from 2018 and 2020.
Yeah.
Right. So in 2018 went terribly for the Republicans, but they did better than expected in the Senate. And then they decided to focus on that. And what they decided was, yeah, you know what, it was a mixed billings. We were supposed to get destroyed, but hey, look how good we did in the Senate. People love us. And then in 2020, they look, they lost. And their answer at first was, yeah, but we picked up some House seats. And then their second answer was, also, it was all fraud, forget it all. So it's kind of like blame COVID and then just lie, which means once again, within the party network, the internal conversation that's supposed to usually happen, the internal conversation about, let's reflect on why we just got our asses kicked and maybe change strategy, just kind of didn't happen. At the moment, and we'll see how long this lasts, but at the moment, Republicans are genuinely pissed off and shot. And like they're looking at Carrie Lake, and like even their like extremists who have radio shows are like, are we in a filter bubble? Like, my God, how did we lose that? We thought that she was the greatest politician in history. So like right now they're actually looking at that and saying, oh wait, maybe our message sucks. Maybe we're actually doing the wrong thing. I don't think that that's going to change the Republican Party overnight. My guess right now is that Trump is still going to be the nominee. But if they get wrecked again in 2024, that's when I would imagine that the Republican Party decides, like as a network decides, you know, yeah, we like authoritarianism, but we also like winning. And it turns out if we have to choose between those two, we're going to choose winning. We're going to start doing different stuff.
I mean, the Republican Party is already going after each other as they should be. You know, this is not the election they were expecting that they should have had. Like a reckoning is due. Yeah. There's going to be a contested speaker's race. Mm-hmm. Senator McConnell might be in trouble. I don't think he will be. He's really good at playing the inside game. You know, there's going to be recriminations about Trump. I don't think Trump is going to be the nominee. And if he is, I think he loses badly. But I don't think that a postmortem will lead to an epiphany. They tried that after the last time they lost. The postmortem said basically nominate anybody who's the exact opposite of Trump and we will win. Nominate somebody who looks like Trump and we will lose. They nominated Trump and they won. Right. So I'm just not sure there's a lot of learning. And not an
epiphany, but the segment of the party network that is losing right now, like, yeah, they had that analysis in 2012. but that segment of the party network didn't build power. So what I'm not saying that like the current authoritarian racists are going to be like, oh, you know what, actually, I'm going to lose all that. It's that they will start losing arguments that currently they're winning, because there are members of the party coalition right now who are saying like, why don't we do other things and we'll stop getting our ass kicked, and nobody's listening to them. They'll start getting listened to if they keep on losing elections this badly.
Which is why I think it's important to win the story about 2022 is that
Fully
lunatics lost.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
Lunatics lost close races. Lunatics lost races they should have run. Lunatics cost the Senate majority. Like who knows what that'll end up looking like. It's also, I think, true that Trump didn't invent racism and xenophobia. He took advantage of what people were feeling and articulated it. Those people aren't going away. They've been a part of the American experiment since the founding of the country, since the colonies. They're always going to be there. The question is, do political elites keep them in check enough to govern relatively center left or relatively center right? Right. And that's where mainstream Republicans have to come back and say, look, we might all believe this stuff and say it to each other at home, but we've got to govern as if democracy mattered.
I think that's right. The one thing I would challenge there a little, and this is where the story about the youth vote does matter. A good friend of mine, David Ferris, wrote a book a few years ago called "The Kids Are All Left," and his argument is, yeah, the next decade or so is going to be really rough, but demographically, it's not that the like the racist segment of America is always going to be there in these numbers. I mean, like it's always going to be there. White supremacy is part of our history. But the base of the Republican Party 4 years from now will be 4 years older than it is right now. Mm-hmm. And they can only live in the villages so long before actuarially you get some changeover. So in that sense, and like there has been a bunch of research now about how like it turns out that Gen X really does suck. Sorry. Speaking for both of us, sorry. You're old X, I'm right at the cusp of millennial, but still technically X. So like Gen Xers ain't great either. But to the extent that like there is an argument that this is kind of about having American democracy outlast the boomers. And in that sense, like this is an election that really matters because what we bought for ourselves is time, and we got to use that time well, but there are some ways that the clock is on our side.
Speaking of time and clock, this could be continued. This will be continued on our live in-person hour-long
with cake.
Because it'll be Dave's birthday. They'll be singing, people. You invited this on yourself. The World Cup is starting this coming Sunday. I have high hopes for the U.S. men. Again, that's the Ben Olsen Germany jersey behind me. Benny, we could talk about the World Cup stuff, but we won't. Those who are interested in how sports journalists should cover the World Cup, I encourage you to check out politicalcommunicationethics.org. I'll put the links in peterloge.com podcast. I'm hosting the event in an hour that will air before this podcast drops with Grant Wall, who's one of the nation's leading soccer journalists, an academic, an anthropologist from Lafayette College named Professor Neha Vora, and our very own Sylvia Wasteboard about that. And I do think the question we put out to Twitter, social media a few weeks ago, how should activists take advantage of this moment? What do we do in this moment? I think is still a live one. How will FIFA respond? How will Qatar respond? How will other countries and other sports around the world respond? All to be discussed on December 13th, live special holiday episode with a exciting special guest.
I'm still offended that you didn't invite me to be a panelist on that sports journalism panel. I feel like it's maybe because I still haven't watched Welcome to Wrexham, and also don't know who Ben Olsen is, but still.
There's so much wrong with your being on that panel. I feel like I get enough Dave. I get the perfect amount of Dave. I don't want to overdo Dave. I'm a fan of Aristotle, and it's the golden mean. You have to have a little Dave, but not too much Dave.
Okay, we're going to end on that.
So follow Dave.
Listening, everyone.
Follow Dave on the Twitter
for as long as it's still there. Dave Karpf at twitter.com, DAVEKARPF. I don't know how Mastodon handles work, but it's mastodon.social, Dave Karpf. You figure it out. And davekarpf.substack.com.
And I'm at PLOGE at Ploge on Twitter and peterloge.com on the old school internet. Thanks everybody. It's been a fun 3 seasons. Sponsors show up and help us pay for season 4.
Solid season.
Night everybody.
Bye.